Chapter 3, Creative Assignment for Option C. Here we are with the final demo of the term. This will be a quick introduction on a process for doing some creative work. And just like the previous options, we will still be using our master studies to help add that extra ingredient to help push our work to the next level. To start off, you want to pick a subject you want to create, such as a character design, environment design, prop design, illustration, or whatever it is that interests you. It can also be something related to your personal work. Most of you have shared the type of work you do during the first week's assignment, so you can actually use that here, where you take what you learn from your favorite artist and try to apply it to something you've created before. However, if you're making something completely new, which is most likely what you'll be going for if you pick this creative option, I will demonstrate on how to go about planning and researching before we put everything together. As artists, all of us have gotten stuck on a blank page or canvas at one time or another. When you start any creative prompt or assignment, it's usually best to plan ahead, brainstorm ideas, and do research accordingly to get things going. For this demonstration, I've decided to design a mech of some sort. It's probably due to the fact that I just recently did the study of the artillery gun in the previous demo, and feeling a bit inspired to do something sci-fi oriented. It's been a long while since I've designed any sort of mech or robot, but with the steps I'll be showing you all, I think I might be able to pull something off. When it comes to putting down ideas, however, it's best to be as specific as possible. Because if I just put down, I want to design a mech robot, it can go in a wide variety of directions, which in turn can still lead to a blank page at the end of the day. So what I'm going to do to help with that is to preview and borrow some of the things I've helped co-teach in 2 other classes here at CGMA. In particular, Dynamic Sketching with lectures by Patrick Ballesteros, and Fundamentals of Design with Tyler Edlin. So with Patrick, he likes to give a certain prompt for one of his vehicle redesign assignments, which is to design a kaiju cleanup machine. And with Tyler's design course, he has you lay out assignments where you add certain words to further modify your prompts. For example, I've listed certain adjectives and feelings to my mech prompt in order to come up with a more specific idea. And the more you specify your idea, the more efficient your research will be, and you will set yourself up for a clearer and stronger design. After all that explanation, I ended up settling with this prompt, which is I want to design a kaiju cleanup mech that feels agile. So those are my modifier words. Now I have a very specific goal in mind that will help me with my research. So a kaiju refers to these large monsters such as Godzilla. And the thing to imagine is, after these giant monsters fight each other and the city's in total destruction, there needs to be some kind of cleanup crew. So I started off by researching a bunch of vehicles such as fire trucks, construction vehicles, and even some heavy industrial cleaning machines. This started to give me a good idea on what to look for in terms of form and function. And then on the other end, when I was thinking of the word agile, the first thing that came to me was a bunch of different animals such as birds and even this tree frog, where they're agile by nature, and they have these certain shape language that kind of conveys that as well. I also picked this scene from The Last Samurai because I thought the armor was really cool and the color scheme. So that's something I was thinking about when I was thinking the word agile, and just what kind of shapes, color, and forms can convey that feeling. After all that research, we can finally start doing some thumbnails. Starting off, I just made a straight line because I know I wanted to make some mechs in a sort of profile view. And the reason for that is I don't want to have to deal with perspective because that's too much to think about So if you guys are doing some kind of character design, creature design, vehicle design, it's best to do a very profile view, or just for character, of course, something maybe frontal. That way you don't have to deal with any sort of action poses where you have to deal with foreshortening and perspective. You just want to deal with mainly shapes in the beginning and thinking about their silhouettes. So based on my research and thinking about my words, which I have up in front of me, I just try to convey certain shapes that make it look like a mech, but also shows these certain words, such as the agility and certain functions that this mech might have. So often when students do character designs, what ends up happening is they want to have a character do all sorts of things. Instead of giving that character a specific job in the beginning, that way they have a clear function and design, and that's something that we can relate to right away. But sometimes when there's too many things that a certain character can do, maybe it's certain superpowers, or maybe something about the costume or personality. So just like mixing all colors evenly and you get muddy colors, if you have too much of everything, things will be unclear, therefore creating a weaker personality. So when I started these thumbnails, it took a while to warm up. Like the first one just has a simple silhouette. Then I started getting into more line and just graphics. They're not necessarily shadows, but just areas where I want the first reads or focal points to be. And even though I'm not designing in a frame, like an illustration or some kind of landscape painting, I'm still thinking about a focal point or how the eye will move and travel around these abstract shapes. So just like a thumbnail composition, these thumbnail mechs, I'm rearranging these shapes and forms and sometimes dealing with values. So I'm juggling those different things, such as the function, what makes this feel agile, thinking about proportions, and also just kind of what looks appealing, what looks cool. And again, if I just had a simple prompt like I want to design a mech, I would have no direction in terms of keywords for doing some research. And I'm going to have too many different thumbnails that might even contradict each other. So spending the time in the beginning in the ideation and research is going to speed up your creative process, down the line. And even though I limited myself to these words, it doesn't mean I can't change them, because usually through the creative process, it's not a clear cut, 1, 2, 3. Often you'll find something new within your thumbnails, which I did in some of these areas where I feel like I can save it for a new idea in the future, and I'll just make note of it. Or sometimes I'll think about an area where all of a sudden I need to find new research for it. I'll pause what I'm doing, I'll look online and try to look into different things that popped into my head. So the creative process is definitely not linear in a sense, where you have to be flexible enough, but at the same time, it's good to have a certain process down. That way you can produce, especially when you're in a time crunch and at work, you're expected to come up with several designs within a day or within a week, depending on your project, and you need to come up with results. So having something you could fall back into in terms of process is a great thing, but definitely constantly try to experiment as you continue designing all sorts of things in your education and your career as well. But just to talk about some of the thumbnails I'm doing, so I started going into more 3/4 views and a little bit of perspective. I just wanted to play around with the shapes a little bit more. And as you can see on some of these, I'm starting to think about maybe some kind of tank, like a water tank. And this mech has to hose things down, to kind of wash things. I even have a mech here. There's kind of a scrubber on its arm. Maybe it needs to scrub things up. because of all the kaiju mess all over the city. And along the process, I even was tempted to do some sort of tank treads. But then I kept reminding myself, like, okay, you're trying to go for agile, and tank treads don't feel agile. They usually feel heavy because they're tanks. That's how they are. And that's how, as an audience, we can relate to it. So I'm definitely not using those shapes. I'm using shapes that are more bird-like. So for the legs, they get skinnier at the end. And also just like the frog, they have really stronger upper legs or thighs. That way it feels a little bit strong but springy at the same time. So there's a lot of weaponry mech out there, and I'm definitely not an expert on mech design, but I've done my fair share in classes in the past, so I'm using those skills here. And for my purposes, usually I would do more thumbnails in this, but as a demo, I hope you guys found this useful in starting up your creations based on your research. Because from here I'm going to pick one. I'm going to start painting it up a little bit, just like my chosen master study. For my master study, I decided to copy Yuan Yuglow's technique. I'm just going to show you the main steps I did in order to try out his technique. Starting off with some colored line work, because I noticed that there were some lines in there that were reddish brown, so I just started off with that. The second step, I basically just put some of the local values. His style is kind of mass oriented, where he has very strong local value separation. And then the third step, I started to flesh it out, getting the subtle differences in the colors, but making sure not to put too much contrast. And the nice thing about doing the study from Yuglow's work was I actually ended up using brushes I never did before and found new ways to achieve this look by tweaking a few settings and finding different ways to use some of the brushes I already had. And I came to about 3 main brushes that had a certain texture to it to achieve that look, which I used to accent on this last step, getting the darker lines and also some of the lighter lights to get that sort of glow and texture in those bright areas. But I hope this helps, seeing it in a different way versus the time-lapse video, and just kind of seeing the main steps as I try to achieve the look from Yuglow's work. And here we are in the final stretch of the final demo of the term. So just like the previous one in chapter 2, I just got my overall lay-in thumbnail, enlarged it on a separate file. That way I don't have to rework the proportions. And more importantly to me is the gestural quality that was in the thumbnail. Because often the tricky thing about working from a thumbnail or some kind of gesture study, whether it's a character design or environment design, is when you start finalizing the work, trying to render it up and get it towards finish, what ends up happening to even the professionals is things start to stiffen up. That sort of initial liveliness to it goes away. So it's definitely hard to achieve when you're cleaning things up, but usually the best way is to refer back to your thumbnail as much as you can and try to extract those qualities that came from it. Now, of course, we also need to knock out some of the bad qualities that were in there, because later on, like, I realized in this thumbnail, like, it only had 2 legs because it was a profile view, but I wanted to have a more dynamic 3/4 view, at least with the legs, because the overall mech or machine that I'm designing is mostly in profile. I go back to the layer with my lay-in and rework that silhouette to figure out where the other legs should go. And part of it is just figuring out how this is going to stand up and balance, but also trying to create a nice looking silhouette through thinking about avoiding tangents or just creating an exciting looking shape. Those are all like design elements, and it just comes with trial and error. And you'll notice why I have all my references in the back. Once in a while, I'll also have a few other references that I look at off screen, because I'm constantly trying to search other images that might pop up in my head really quickly if I need to look something up as I'm going through with the line work. Because there's areas where I get really confused, like how I should design or define an area. And as much as I can, I want to avoid a lot of guesswork. I don't want to try to have to hide stuff that I don't understand. But even then, with my limited time of designing mechs and spaceships and things of this nature, there's still a lot of things I'm not sure about, and we'll need a lot of time to continue studying and practicing designing this sort of thing. So this was definitely great mileage for me. And one of the things I noticed in my references, just to kind of make this feel a little bit more believable, is just putting some kind of number or logo on this as well to kind of add to the storytelling or the function of this vehicle. Now that I've finished up the majority of the line work, I'm starting to prepare a bit of coloring on this and painting up some of the local values. And I wanted a nice graphical read, so I definitely brought up the master study as a reference again, just to kind of remind myself how to approach this going forward. I would have liked to flesh that out a little bit more, but for the purpose of this demo, and also in sort of the loose and lively quality that the master study presented, I wanted to be able to capture that in a sort of a sketchy and painterly way. So I was looking at a lot of custom modern motorcycles and a lot of the color schemes they have, and I really like the gray and orange color scheme. I would have left it like this for personal work, but in terms of actually designing something and making it a functional working mech, where it's sort of in the cleaning and construction department, this needs to relate to our audience in that way, so they know they're not looking at a hostile military mech or just something for a sports use like a motorcycle. So after I work around the background and foreground areas, trying to paint it as simple as the Ugolo study, I try to scrap the original. I tried to experiment with some of the more construction vehicle colors, painting it up yellow. At first I didn't really like it, but then I started looking at the wasp that was also in my reference. And besides the agile quality that the wasp has, it also has the aggressiveness to it. So just like the wasp, putting in some of the black and orange patterns kind of help. But I also try to experiment with other colors as well, trying some green stripes, lighter areas for the water tank, things like that. So I'm using the color to also tell the function of this mech. So think of it like your character designs. You're not just putting random colors that look cool, but think about their jobs or their personality or even their environment. You know, they might be on a certain team or class or society that dictates, you know, what they wear. So just as I found in my reference with the sirens on the fire truck, I put the red siren on top of the mech. I put a hard hat color on the technician. And also put some red on the ends of the feet of the mech. Because, you know, looking at the vehicles, there's always like safety warnings, you know, making sure that the people working with these machinery have some warnings, you know, where the danger areas are. So I know we're in the last stretch, but you know, there's definitely a lot of things I still wanted to do with this design. It was a lot of fun. And even with the master study, I feel like I haven't quite painted this up all the way to, you know, that type of style. But working this way has definitely pushed my work in a different way. Like I'm using brushes I've never tried. I'm separating my local values a lot more, where I would go straight into lighting before. And here I'm just trying to think about the mass and texture and just kind of letting things go, keeping things loose. And I'm going to call this one finished for the demonstration. I hope this was enough to help you get started if you choose this option. Since it's the beginner class, I don't expect everyone to choose this one, but for those that want an extra challenge or have more time to do some research and even prepare for some of the classes you're looking to take in the future, you know, this is a great assignment to try out. And with that said, I will conclude this week and also the term. So I want to thank all of you for making it this far and for signing up for my class. I hope you learned a thing or two to help prepare you, for the rest of your artistic goals, whether it be for a class or your career. And as usual, I'm excited and looking forward to seeing the kind of work you do for this final week.